You're listening to an Airwave Media Podcast.
Hello, saver. Whether you're saving for that trip to the tropics or saving for an emergency, now is the time to take advantage of Wells Fargo's savings options. Wells Fargo offers savings accounts that can help you save towards your goals. So, what are you saving for? Visit a Wells Fargo branch or wellsfargo.com/save to open a savings account today.
Wells Fargo Bank, N.A., member FDIC.
Hi everybody and welcome back to Who Did What Now, the history podcast that is not your history class, with me, exasperated host, Katie Charlwood, Buffalo wine connoisseur and reader of books.
So it's been a week. It's been 2 weeks actually since you heard from me. I want to apologize. It's been a hectic week. We got called back to work suddenly because I'm now essential. Woo! And I also have an esophageal tear, which is very unpleasant, to be blunt. But it means I'm now currently on the picky toddler diet, which is generally a lot of beige and things shaped like animals. Honestly, though, I have never been so happy to see chicken nuggies in my life. Like, chicken nuggies make the pain go away. The emotional pain. Physical pain very much still there, but the emotional pain. I can't even have grapes. Like, it's so annoying, but it's fine. And had to deal with some, harassment and stuff on TikTok, but sometimes I think how much easier it would stop and just stand down and just ignore. And then I think to myself, why should I? Why should I be the one to back down and be silenced? Because if I don't stand up to the bully, doesn't that mean the bully wins? And generally when I deal with people, for the most part, I'm not perfect. Because for the most part, I'll turn around and I'll try and be like, this is what you did. This is why it's wrong. Please take a step back and reevaluate this. And other times I don't have the patience for it. And I'm like, go choke on a bag of dicks.
So, the news. The news has been a thing, and I tend to not talk about modern stuff too much, but Prince Philip has died. Oh, the royal family have news. And I'm like, Prince Philip's dead. The Queen has announced that her husband is dead. I was like, oh, shit. I'm standing there next to my mum going, oh. Is it weird that I'm, compared to Margaret Thatcher? I see him as the lesser evil. And I know what you're thinking. Stop that jibber-jabber and fact me. And so I shall fact you. But first, we've got to get our source on. So these sources, they're either, if I couldn't get it on Kindle or online, it wasn't happening. So we have The Duke, 100 Chapters in the Life of Prince Philip by Ian Lloyd, and Young Prince Philip, The True Story of His Turbulent Early Life by Philip Eade. And My Husband and I, The Inside Story of the Royal Marriage by Ingrid Seward, and then everything else is biography.com, history.com, britannica.com, and that's where we got all our information. So, let's start at the beginning. Prince Philip of Greece and Denmark was born on Corfu, the Greek island, on the 10th of June 1921. He is the youngest child and only son of Prince Andrew of Greece and Denmark and Princess Alice of Battenberg. So he's basically a prince of both Greece and Denmark, and he's in the line of succession for both thrones. So, he has 4 older sisters, Margarita, Theodora, Cecily, who's his favourite and he's closest to, and then Sophie. So he gets baptised in the Greek Orthodox Church in St. George's Church on the Old Fortress in Corfu. So not long after Philip's born, his grandfather, Louis Mountbatten, he had become a naturalised British subject who had a career in the Royal Navy and had renounced all of his titles during the First World War. Because there was a big anti-German sort of sentiment in Britain after the First World War. I'm sure you can guess why. So anyway, the Greco-Turkish War is going on, and effectively Greece basically blames King Constantine I for the defeat. and he's forced to abdicate. So the Greek Revolution is declared, and the Greek army and navy, there's a coup. So Constantine, he's sailed for Sicily, and he's like, I'm never going back, it's fine. So a bunch of politicians and a general, there's this thing called the Trial of the Six. And there's a trial, they get executed, it's a thing. And as far as they're aware, Prince Andrew, his life's going to be in danger, and that Princess Alice is in danger, and all the kids are in danger. So Prince Andrew and his family, they're effectively banished by the military government. They're banished from Greece. So they flee on the HMS Calypso, which is like this British Navy vessel, and Philip is effectively smuggled out in an orange crate. So it's just a box for fruit, but it's an orange crate. So they get the fuck out of Dodge, and they head to France. So they end up staying in this house in St. Cloud because his aunt, Princess George of Greece and Denmark, she's fairly rich. Philip never actually learns to speak Greek. He understands it a bit, but he spoke a variety of English, French and German. But he really thought of himself more as Danish. His parents divorce. Princess Alice, she gets diagnosed with schizophrenia and is placed in a fucking asylum. His dad fucks off to Monte Carlo and sets up there. 4 of his sisters, they marry German princes and move to Germany. And he basically gets sent around from pillar to post. So he goes to like schools in Paris, in England, in Germany. Like he ends up in the one in Germany because his brother-in-law owns it. And so they don't have to like pay fees. Eventually he gets sent to Gordonstoun School in Scotland, which was founded by Kurt Hahn, who was Jewish, and he was basically fleeing persecution with the rise of Nazism in Germany. In 1937, when Philip's like 16, his sister Cecily, his favourite sister, her and her husband George Donatus, and her 2 sons Ludwig and Alexander, her mother-in-law and governess, a famous glider pilot, her mother-in-law, and then like 3 crew, and also Cecily was pregnant at the time. She was very far under pregnancy, and she actually gives birth on this flight. They're supposed to be heading to, they're flying from Munich to London for a royal wedding of some kind. There's bad weather, they have to divert, they hit off this chimney and the plane crashes and everybody dies. So in 1939, Philip leaves Gordonstoun. Gordonstoun, I should say, actually, life at Gordonstoun inspire him when it comes to the Duke of Edinburgh awards that we're going to talk about in a wee minute. So Philip, he basically completes a term as a cadet at the Royal Naval College in Dartmouth. And while he's there, his uncle gets him to escort the princesses Elizabeth and Margaret during a royal visit, because King George VI and Queen Elizabeth are there. And Elizabeth, she's like, because apparently Philip, quote unquote, looks like a Viking, and she's 13 years old and her hormones are starting to come out, and she's like, bow, now, 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 now. Philip and Elizabeth are third cousins through Queen Victoria, and they're second cousins once removed through King Christian IX of Denmark. So Elizabeth is absolutely smitten, and she starts writing to him when she's 13, and he's 18 at this point. So they start writing. Like a lot of the time I see people saying that they started courting when she was 13, but that wouldn't have been allowed by any sort of stretch of the imagination. And so they start writing to one another anyway. And, he finishes his first term at Dartmouth and he moves back to Greece. He lives with his mum for a month in the middle of, in sort of mid-1939. And this is after him, barely speaking to his mother since she was committed to an asylum. So while he's with his mum, his first cousin, King George II of Greece, is like, hey, buddy, I think maybe you should continue and go back to the Royal Navy. And, because here's the thing, Philip, even though he had a title, he had no money. He had nothing. He was completely, done.
So, it's weird. I mean, I'm not going to lie that it's weird corresponding, writing letters to a 13-year-old when you're 18. Kind of creepy. And I mean, his uncle was pushing him into it, but that doesn't change the fact that it is, a bit creepy. Okay, so people keep bringing up the fact that they're cousins, like they're third cousins, on one side, and then second cousins once removed on the other. And it's like, yeah, because they're royalty in Europe. And at that point, anybody prominent would have been married to somebody prominent. So, 1939 hits, later on 1939. And Philip. So basically, during his time in the war, he ends up becoming first lieutenant, I think. So like a second lieutenant, some kind of lieutenant. Like he saves like his crew from a bomber ship. He gets the Greek cross. He's mentioned in dispatches, for his bravery and all this kind of shit. And all in all, as a navy man, as a military man, like he's doing the job. He's being that thing. And one thing we seem to forget about him being in the Navy is the fact that he kind of had to, because he had nothing else. He had no money. He barely had a title. By giving himself a career, he would be able to do something and not have to rely on rich relatives giving him money and shit. Like, he's mainly in, sailing in the Pacific. He's there when Japan signs, like, the peace treaty. And during all this time, he's writing letters to Princess Elizabeth, but and you got to remember, during those periods, a royal engagement, any kind of engagement really at the time, like, would be short. A long engagement was not a thing anybody had. Like, engagements were expected to be short, and then you would get married. 1946 comes along, and Philip he's basically doing teaching stuff, because, the war's over. And he starts showing up at a lot of these events. He's generally escorting Elizabeth. He's doing the courting shenanigans. And he asks King George for Elizabeth's hand in marriage. King George is like, I want to wait until after her 21st birthday to announce it. And he's like, I guess. So, and that's when you really start seeing him show up more. And he has to go around, and he's at all of these fancy events with the aristocracy. And unlike a lot of the British aristocracy, he's fucking poor. Like, he's poor. He's got no money, no mullah, none of that good stuff. So Philip's hanging around with the aristocracy and shit, and it's a very different circle to what he's in, because he's a navy man, and he's also poor as fuck. So, like, he's very much looked down upon. He doesn't have the social airs and graces that one would expect someone to have. Yeah, so they celebrate her 21st birthday, then they announce the engagement. In 1947, they announce their engagement, and then they get married. In order for them to get married, he has to renounce the Greek and Danish titles. So, like, he's no longer Prince Philip. He's no longer a prince. He has to remove, and he has no titles. So he does this, he becomes a naturalised British subject, and then he takes the anglicised version of his mother's maiden name. So Battenberg becomes Mountbatten. But like the day before the wedding, King George, he's like, I'm going to make you the Duke of Edinburgh, which I think only 2 people had ever had before. So while they're married, because she's still a princess, like on her own, she would be referred to as Princess Elizabeth. But when they were treated as a couple, they would be referred to the Duke and Duchess of Edinburgh, because patriarchy, even though she has a higher peerage than him. So they have 2 kids. They have Charles and Anne. They're living in Clarence House, and he gets like a commander position of the HMS Magpie, and he continues to have his sort of naval career as long as, King George is still alive. So, bish bash bosh. So King George, he's got stomach cancer. He's getting sicker and sicker and sicker. And as such, when like the head royal is unable to do like so many duties, so then the senior royals have to then take on those roles, which would be like, now that she's 21, it would be Princess Elizabeth. So they end up doing like a tour of Canada, and they're doing a tour of like the Commonwealth, so they end up in Kenya. And it's in Kenya where they are informed that King George is dead.
Being a part of a royal family might seem enticing, but more often than not, it comes at the expense of everything else, like your freedom, your privacy, and sometimes even your head. Wondery's new podcast, Even the Royals, pulls back the curtain on royal families, past and present, from all over the world, to show you the darker side of what it means to be royalty. From icons like Grace Kelly, Oscar-winning actress turned Princess of Monaco, who the world saw as the ultimate good girl. She mastered playing a happy wife and mother, but beneath it all, she was desperately lonely. Grace spent her whole life working towards perfection, and it ultimately cost her her happiness. Or King Ludwig II from Bavaria. He was only 18 when his father died, leaving the crown to him and a duty to rule that he never wanted. He refused to lead and used the funds from the royal treasury to further his extreme love of opera. But this choice eventually cost him the crown and his life. Follow Even the Royals on the Wondery app or wherever you get your podcasts. You can binge Even the Royals ad-free right now on Wondery Plus.
And this changes both of their lives, because up until his illness took hold, they had as much of a normal life as anyone in their position could have. They're doing the tour of the Commonwealth and they end up in Kenya, and he is the one who's told the news regarding King George's death, and now he is the one who has to tell his wife that not only has her father died, but she is now Queen of England. And not only does he have to deal with the fact that his wife is grieving, but he now has to be aware that anything that was his own is now gone. He is now a subject of the crown one way or the other. If you take into consideration the context of the time and the sociological sort of framework of the era, not only is he a man, he has to be subservient to his wife in an official capacity, but he also had like a sense of duty. So it's reported that basically Philip's standing there and he looks like his world is caving in. He's crushed. You can, not often do you see emotion on that man's face, but apparently it was very apparent at the time. And they basically fly straight back to England. And Elizabeth, her coronation is held off for a year or 6 months. There's a delay. So the discussion then happens. King George is barely... The body's probably still warm at this point. And people are having an argument over the name of the house. What name will this royal household take? Obviously the Mountbattens are House of Mountbatten, And, Philip's suggestion is, the House of Edinburgh. Because why not name it after the dukedom? They've been known as the Duke and Duchess of Edinburgh. Queen Mary, the Dowager Queen, she hears about this and she's like, no, fuck this for a game of soldiers. I'm gonna go chat to Winston fucking Churchill, the baked ham of a man. And he advises Elizabeth that this shouldn't happen. So Philip gets fucking mad because all of this happens and it means that he is the only man in the country whose children do not have his surname. What they do is... But they do come to this sort of agreement that the names Mountbatten Windsor will be used for any male descendants who do not have a peerage or titles of prince, princess, whatever. Or who don't have the title of who are not in the direct line of succession. So technically, I think Harry would probably be known as Mountbatten Windsor now, I think. So when they would go to school and stuff, the princes, they would use the name Mountbatten Windsor. Anyhow, Philip basically pulls a Prince Albert, right? He's looking around and he's like, what's going on here? He's seen revolutions happen. He's lost so many parts of his family because, he made a comment before about why he didn't like the Russians because they killed half his fucking family and, okay. He's very aware of revolutions. He's very aware of what it can be like to be banished from your country and the importance of a dutiful monarchy. That's his perspective. And he gets put in charge of the coronation. So he's the head of the coronation committee. And he's like, listen, we need to bring, TVs are in households. Make this an event. We want people to see the Queen. We want them to see you. Philip was all about reforming the monarchy because he sees what happens when you don't. And it was his idea to have the cameras in the Queen's coronation. And him and the Queen Mother, they used to get into some spats, which shouldn't be surprising because the Queen Mother was the fucking worst. They always portrayed her, I think, because of TV shows like Spitting Image, which was a show about puppets at the time, in the 90s. They would portray the Queen Mother as a sort of lovely old Yorkshire lady, but in fact she was actually an absolute gobshite and orchestrated things. Anyway, not the point. So the Queen gets coronated and so Liz, she decides to give Philip a title. He becomes Prince Philip, the Duke of Edinburgh. So now he's a prince. Basically gives him precedence when it comes to, precedence of everything except in Parliament, where he's second to... Basically what she says is he's the top man in the country and no one is above him except in Parliament when it comes to the Prince of Wales. So Philip was really inspired by his time at Gordonstown. And he felt like this was the making of... And that helped him in whatever way. He felt like it bettered him as a person. And as such, he used the fundamental concepts of Gordonstown by Carl Hahn to create the Duke of Edinburgh Awards. So basically, in 1956, the Duke of Edinburgh Award, it's created, and it's for boys initially, between the ages of 15 and 18, and it was designed for boys who weren't really interested in joining any of the other sort of youth movements in Britain at the time, so like the Scouts or anything like that. The whole point of it was like you didn't have to join an organisation, you didn't have to wear a uniform, you could just be involved. And what was it, in the first year 7,000 boys had enrolled in the scheme. So in 1958 girls were able to join the programme too, but the programme was different for girls than it was for boys. But then and the age range was also from 14 to 20. But then in 1969, like a decade later, the programme was basically changed to involve young people from the ages of 14 to 21, and it was like a single programme, so it wasn't like a boys section and a girls section, it was all one thing. So basically there's a bunch of award programmes, and it's stuff like so there's objectives in all of these like different areas. So there's like a physical one, so you have to improve in like the area of sport or dance or some kind of fitness. Skills, which is practical and social skills and personal interests. Volunteering, so you're basically volunteering at services that for individuals or the community. And then an expedition, so planning, training for and completing an adventurous journey in the UK or abroad. Now this gold level comes in, and basically the participants have to do this fifth residential section. So they have to stay and work away from home for 5 days doing this shared activity. So yeah, the 3 levels, bronze, silver and gold. So 3 to 6 months, 6 to 9 months, 12 to 18 months respectively. So this was mainly for mainland UK. And then, so if you were in Northern Ireland and you were involved, you had the option of getting the Gaishka cert or the Duke of Edinburgh cert. It's up to you. And then in a bunch of other countries, there's a bunch of organisations that are either based on or supported by the Duke of Edinburgh Award, and it becomes a big thing. And I actually almost participated in the Duke of Edinburgh Awards when I was in college, but decided against it because I was like, I don't know what physical activity I'm going to do because I got no physical skills. I've got scoliosis and other shit, So yeah, after Elizabeth, ascends to the throne, Prince Philip, his naval career technically has to end, but he's still involved in the armed forces. He was made Admiral of the Sea Cadet Corps. He was an Air Commodore-in-Chief for the Air Training Corps and a Colonel-in-Chief at the Army Cadet Force. And then in 1953, he becomes the Admiral of the Fleet, Marshal of the Royal Air Force and Field Marshal. So over the years, he does the thing. He accompanies Elizabeth on all these state visits, openings of Parliament, and becomes a president and patron of 800 organisations and charities. And him being a physical person, so yeah, most of his stuff was, related to sport and welfare of young people. So in 1961, Prince Philip makes history by being the first member of the royal family to be interviewed on the television, which went, probably better than could be expected of Philip, to be honest. He was being interviewed to do with the Commonwealth Technical Training Week. So he becomes the chancellor of a bunch of universities. Edinburgh, not surprised there, Cambridge, Wales and Salford. And in 1961, Philip actually becomes the first president of the World Wildlife Fund UK. And that's up until 1982. And he also becomes the international president of the WWF from 81 to 96. So, during the time, Philip, he gets asked at one point in the 70s, whether he's the Prince Albert to Victoria, if he's the real power behind the throne. And he's no. So basically, these reports come every now and again about the Duke of Edinburgh and the Queen, drifting apart. And behind closed doors, when it comes to personal matters, he was effectively the man of the house. But when it came to matters of state and official things like that, she was the boss. The fact that they were able to reconcile that as a couple. So yeah, him being the boss behind the doors is the reason that Prince Charles ended up being sent to Gordonstown instead of something a bit closer to home, a bit more befitting someone of Charles's temperament. He gets sent to Gordonstown because that's what Philip wants. So during this long marriage, there was this whole thing of did Prince Philip cheat on the Queen? And it's for the most part, no. If he did, it was with one person, because we only have evidence for one. Basically, the actress Pat Kirkwood, whose legs were once called the eighth wonder of the world. So they met on at least 7 occasions, and she always denied there was any kind of relationship between them. But Kirkwood tells a journalist, and I quote, "A lady is not normally expected to defend her honour." So she says that Prince Philip comes uninvited into her dressing room. The Duchess of Abercorn had a quote-unquote passionate friendship with the Duke, but there's no real evidence saying that he was unfaithful. And sometimes I have to wonder, would he be so stupid as to do that, though? Because if you're married to the Queen, I feel like it would be pretty easy to be like, look at motherfucker here, he's cheated on the Queen. So, he also, so he supports things like BAFTA, the International Equestrian Federation, which isn't surprising because, Princess Anne, the British Heart Foundation, so on and so forth. So, reforming, that's right, that's where we are. The Christmas message, which the monarch always does, it was Philip's idea to have it be televised. Because, again, the image of the Queen, seeing the Queen, having that message go into the homes of people at Christmas time, which was very important to them, just made a lot more sense. So that's what they do. They do that. It makes perfect sense. It was also his idea for that really awful, awful documentary. They cover it in The Crown. It is so bad that it was never repeated. It just, the concept, I think, was a good idea, but the follow-through was just fucking atrocious. And it wasn't just so, yeah, he's doing all these reforms because he's looking around at stuff and he's like, why are you doing it this way? Like footmen's powdered wigs. He's like, why? What is the point of this? So basically there's this whole thing about how the royals get paid. So basically the royals get an allowance which has to go towards their official duties. Anything they don't use that doesn't go towards that gets taxed. So in general, it gets used because it pays staff and everything else. And Philip, for being the gruff arsehole that he is actually pretty welcoming when it comes to outsiders with regards to the royal family, because he was one himself. So while King George is still alive, so before they, they're taking on a few more royal duties, and Princess Margaret, she's starting this sort of affair with Townsend, who's this, for King George's his private secretary or whatever it is, and they start having this affair. But Townsend is divorced. There's all this stuff about, Philip intervening, and he didn't, because he didn't see the point of intervening in anyone's relationships. He thought, I'm just going to take a step back. But when it comes to Margaret and Townsend, the reason that their relationship didn't blossom was because he was divorced, she could not marry him. That's the royal family, that was their whole thing. So Margaret was basically given a choice. The choice was either marry him, you can marry him, but you lose all of your titles. You give up your line of succession, you give up everything to do with the monarchy, you become probably as common as an ex-royal could be, you know what I mean? But she chose the monarchy. Anywho, now we get to Charles and Diana. So he's the one who basically tells Charles to shit or get off the pot when it comes to Diana. He's like, either marry the girl or step away. Diana is put in place for Charles because she is a nice Protestant virgin and they want them to get married. So they get married, yada yada yada. When they both start having affairs and doing all that kind of stuff, Philip tries to mend the rift. He's like, guys, come on, you're all acting the dick. And they're he's trying to get them to reconcile. It doesn't fucking work. And to the point where he actually writes to Diana going, I'm really disappointed in you both. And frankly, and he's like, you need to sort of look at this from each other's point of view, so on and so forth. Needless to say, this does not have the desired effect. And they get divorced and he's like, well, fuck it. Basically, a year after the divorce is finalised, here's the thing. When Diana dies, they were all in Balmoral at the time that Diana dies, in 97. And the boys want to go to church. So, Philip and Liz, they take them to church. They basically keep the boys hidden in Balmoral and they don't make public appearances because these children have just lost their mother and they don't want them being hounded by the fucking tabloids.
The regular season is heating up. New stars are emerging, and that means more opportunities to win up to 25 times your cash on Prize Picks, the most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Just select 2 or more players, pick more or less on their projection on a wide variety of stats, and place your entry. It's that easy. Let it fly to turn $10 into $250 with just a few taps. Easy gameplay, quick withdrawals, and injury insurance on your picks are what make Prize Picks the #1 daily fantasy sports app. Watch your favorite players and get paid doing it this basketball season. See your entries make progress during the game or make new entries for the second half in the fourth quarter. 3-pointers, assists, rebounds, and everything in between are yours for the taking. Join the Prize Picks community of more than 7 million players who have already signed up. Right now, Prize Picks will match your first deposit of up to $100. Just download the Prize Picks app and use code GET100. That's code GET100 on Prize Picks for a first deposit match of up to $100. Prize Picks. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy.
Just fair enough. This one fucking bugs me so much. So the boys are unsure on whether or not they want to walk behind the coffin at Diana's funeral. And basically her brother, Diana's brother, Earl Spencer, he told, Prince Philip that the boys really want to do it, but they're just scared of doing it alone, blah, 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 blah. But they really want to do it. He was like, they really want to, but they're really scared about it. And Philip's like, I think you'll regret it if you're not involved. And so Philip goes to his grandchildren and says, I'll walk. You can walk with me. Initially, Philip didn't want them to fucking walk behind the coffin. He was like, no, they shouldn't have to be put on a public spectacle like this in this fashion because they're fucking children. And he ends up he ends up being the turning point in them doing a thing he didn't want them to do. And I don't like Philip for the most part. So Philip is fucking pissed that when he finds out that they didn't want to do it at all and that this was all orchestrated by fucking Spencer, but whatever. So another thing that happens, because technically he's like the head of the Freemasons or whatever. So loads of people are convinced that Prince Philip ordered a hit out on Diana, which honestly doesn't make sense. And I'm a true crime obsessive, and I have looked and delved into this because I was alive when this happened, and I've been obsessed with the fact. And honestly, it's just a horrific accident, and if you're looking for somebody to blame for Diana's death, blame the fucking paparazzi. It was them. Prince Philip may be a dick 98% of the time, but he didn't kill her. So by 2009, Philip, he becomes the longest serving British royal consort. And he gets interviewed when he's 79 years old, and he says he couldn't imagine anything worse than being a centenarian. He didn't want to live to be 100 because bits of him were falling off already. So during the Queen's Golden Jubilee, he's supposed to start reducing his royal duties, and he's like, by the time he's 90, they're like, yeah, I'm going to start slowing down on these royal duties. I'm going to do less of them. And every year they waited for him to do less. And on his 90th birthday, as a wedding gift, the Queen gives him the title of Lord High Admiral. And then later on in the year, he ends up, he suffers from chest pains. He has to get a stent in his heart. He has to get a stent in and go through coronary angioplasty. During the Queen's Diamond Jubilee in 2012, they're in the middle of a celebration. He has to get taken to hospital. Turns out he's got a bladder infection. Has to go through a quote-unquote minor procedure and finally gets out. So he misses, this happens. At this point, I'm convinced he's just being held together by Jim Henson animatronics. By 2017, so he just misses public appearances left and right. He misses in 2017, he misses the state opening of Parliament, Royal Ascot, so on and so forth. And as such, in 2017, at the age of 96, he decides to retire from royal duties. And his last solo public engagement is meeting the Royal Marines. Since 1952, he had completed 22,219 solo engagements. So, there's other stuff he had to do, when he has to be, with the Queen. Oh, yeah, in 2017 as well, they celebrate their 70th wedding anniversary. 2018, he ends up having a hip replacement in April. And then in May, he attends the wedding of Prince Harry and Meghan Markle. And in October, he goes to the wedding of Princess Eugenie and Jack Brooksbank. He basically wakes up and sees how he feels and decides whether or not he's going to go to an engagement that day. Go to an event or not. Which is fair enough for somebody who's slowly turning into the crypt keeper. So 2019, 17th of January. This bugs me so fucking much. But as someone who deals with how do I put this? I don't know if you've ever met somebody who's like infirm, is aging and is losing the ability to do things. And sometimes they are so determined to continue to do the things that they used to do that they're just going to keep doing it regardless of whether they hurt themselves or anybody else. So I understand the concept. I'm still pissed about it. 17th of January 2019, 97-year-old Philip, the Duke of Edinburgh, is near Sandringham Estate and he is involved in a car crash. Unharmed except for a bit of bleeding. And the driver and the passenger of the other car involved in the incident were taken to hospital. So the passenger in the car, she breaks her wrist. But thankfully, the driver and the driver's 9-month-old baby were fine. And here's the thing, the crash was absolutely Philip's fault. Like, he does this, like, public apology thing. 3 weeks later, he ends up voluntarily surrendering his driving licence, which he fucking should. There was no reason for a 97-year-old man to be behind the wheel of a car. So he was seen behind the wheel of a car, like, on his own estates after that. So 2019, Philip ends up in hospital again with a quote-unquote pre-existing condition. He ends up, and Prince Philip and the Queen, they end up isolating in Windsor Castle during at the start of the COVID-19 pandemic. And in July, he steps down as the Colonel-in-Chief of the Rifles, and the Duchess of Cornwall, she takes up the spot. January 21, Queen Elizabeth and Prince Philip get vaccinated. I'm going to say good for them. I'm going to say good for them for getting vaccinated. They're technically in the high-risk group anyway, so I'm not that... So, you know what I mean? But also, I think it was very important them to show that they were doing it. So in February, Philip gets taken into hospital again as a precautionary measure. In March, he's back in hospital again. And on the 16th of March, he's discharged. Now, at this point, I am convinced that the reason he was discharged from hospital was because they knew he was dying. And I think the whole purpose was to create a hospice-like scenario. So palliative care for him for the end of his life. So Prince Philip, the Duke of Edinburgh, he dies on the 9th of April 2021 at the age of 99, 2 months before his 100th birthday. And the official announcement is that he has died peacefully in his sleep. Let's talk about some of the shit Philip has said over the years. Oh, how do I put this? The term inappropriate vibe really should have been described for Philip because he had a habit of just putting his foot in his mouth wherever he went. I mean, the man did not give a fuck, but yeah. At a Women's Institute thing in Scotland, he says that British women can't cook. He says to a Scottish driving instructor in 1999, how do you keep the natives off the booze long enough to pass the test? He really didn't like singers very much. Like, he didn't like Tom Jones or Madonna, like he was like, or Elton John. He, when he looks at the Duke and Duchess of York when they get a house in 86, his response is, it looks like a tart's bedroom. The thing is as well, like, so much of what Philip said and does, and this is often commented as, like, gaffes. They call it a gaffe. Like, oh, Prince Philip's gaffes. And it's like, so, like, what I don't understand is, like, why you've lived long enough, you can move with time and with history, and you can, like, follow it. It just feels like he got to a certain point and was like, no, this is enough. This is enough. I don't need to do any more. For example, so let's get into the complicated legacy of Prince Philip. He's visiting Nigeria in 2003, and there's the royal, so the Duke of Edinburgh and the Queen, they meet the president, who's wearing Nigeria's national dress, and he says to him, you look like you're ready for bed. When visiting British students in China, he says to one student, he says to students that if they stay there much longer, they're going to become slutty-eyed. To a British man who trekked the Kokoda track in Papua New Guinea, asks him, oh, so you managed not to get eaten then? In 1999, he asks the black politician, Lord Taylor of Warwick, what exotic part of the world he came from. He asked, in 2002, he asked an Australian Indigenous businessman if they still threw spears at each other. In 2009, when he met US President Barack Obama, who was describing his day meeting Chinese leaders, Russians, British politicians, Philip asks if he could tell the difference between them.
Like, part of me is like, okay, well, he's an old dude. He is what we would call a man of a certain generation. He's also from the Navy, and that's a very specific way to be. Like, I know friends who swear like sailors, and he sounds like the kind of guy who would have been funny up until the 80s, you know what I mean? And then would have stopped being funny. I just find it very interesting because, like, with some comments you can understand, like, in the 1950s, you could blame this on ignorance. But when the world is evolving and you are a symbol of an institution and you are a representative of the monarchy, of the very crown that you swore to protect, maybe you should take a step back and be less of a fucking dick. So there we go. There's Prince Philip for you. So he may have had a sense of honour and a sense of duty and supported his wife through, like, the biggest career one could have, you could argue. But also was a huge fucking racist who never learned to shut his mouth. It always feels like, Prince Philip always feels like 2 steps forward and 1 step back, like no matter what he did. Yeah, and it's a complicated legacy, and he's a symbol for an institution which I'm not entirely sure should still exist. So, what did we learn today? All people die. Yeah. And that the BBC really knows how to beat a dead horse. Wasn't there like 24 hours of footage? Like, mate, it's fine. We all know what a documentary is. It's good. I just want to say thank you to the very first producer of the show, the lovely Haley from Niagara Falls, who's my top patron on Patreon and the very first producer of the show. Thou art a precious, thunder-darting sprite. If you want to be a producer and get a shout out at the end of the show, you can, of course, by going on to patreon.com/whodidwhatnow and by supporting the show that way. And that's Patreon is not the only way you can show your support. You can always follow on social media, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, that's Who Did What Now Pod, and Twitter is Who Did What Now PD, because there aren't enough characters. But anyway. Recommendations. Reading. I had to take a break from reading, but I'm currently reading Agent Fifi and the Wartime Honey Trap Spies. Listening, I started listening to My Favourite Murder again. I hadn't listened to like a good few, but I was doing some stuff, and I'm back at work now. So I was doing some stuff, and I was listening to them because that's fun. I like to listen to them. I find them fun, and because I like my true crime to have a bit of comedy in it. Just as a person. Watching Falcon and Winter Soldier every week it knocks it out of the park, man. Wow, like seriously, it's astounding. It's very strange though, because WandaVision always felt like 15 minutes, and each episode of the Falcon and the Winter Soldier like feels like a full movie. I what Marvel sorcery is this? But I'm digging it. Like, anyway, and I am gonna bid you all farewell, and so I'm gonna say adios, au revoir, auf Wiedersehen, my friends. Bye bye.